Welcome to the Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. My name is Dr. Adriana Popescu. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and leader in the field of mental health, energy psychology, addiction, trauma, and empowerment. In this podcast, we will be exploring mental health from a variety of perspectives, from the spiritual to the shamanic and beyond. What if mental illness isn't everything we think it is? What if everything we see as a pathology is actually a possibility? What else is possible with mental health?
Hi, everyone. Dr. Adriana Popescu here with you with another episode of Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. We have a very special guest today. I'm really excited to talk with her, Julie Ryan. Yes, Julie Ryan's journey proves that intuitive and healing abilities aren't just gifts, they're skills that anyone can learn. She was a successful inventor and serial entrepreneur when she mastered the art of medical intuition, spirit communication, and energy healing more than 25 years ago, blending business acumen with extraordinary spiritual insight. Today, she's known as a buffet of psychicness, able to scan the human body, detect illnesses, facilitate energetic healings, access past lives, and communicate with spirits, both living and deceased, all from a distance. Julie turns her intuitive abilities on and off at will, practicing only with permission and maintaining strict confidentiality out of deep ethical respect. In addition to her intuitive work, Julie's 35-year business career includes founding 9 companies across 5 industries and inventing globally distributed surgical devices. She's also the host of her own podcast, Ask Julie Ryan, streamed in over 100 countries, where she scans callers live each week and shares insights that bridge the practical and the mystical. Above all, she is a wife, mother, grandmother, and friend, proof that it's possible to live fully grounded in both the spiritual and real world. Can't wait to ask you all kinds of questions about what I just read. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, I cook dinner, I do laundry, I take out the trash, it's not all glamorous.
Well, I would love to hear about your story and how you went from, business superwoman to psychic pioneer. Let's hear about it.
30 years ago, a friend gave me a book called Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Mays, who called herself a medical intuitive, and that was a new term for me. I had been in the medical business on the hospital supply side of the equation for probably 10 or more years at that point. And so I was interested in helping people heal, but through the traditional ways, through doctors and other medical providers, and coming up with inventions to help in surgery and in other departments of the hospital. So I thought, well, what the heck's a medical intuitive? And back then we didn't have the internet yet. So I did the old fashioned thing and I went to a bookstore. And I thought they'd be more likely to have something about woo woo, perhaps, than even my local library. So I went to a bookstore and I found a book by the late Barbara Brennan called Hands of Light. And she's a former NASA physicist. She was a former NASA physicist who parlayed very complex quantum physics concepts into understandable languaging for the non scientific mind. That would be me. And she utilized energy to help people heal. And I was fascinated by that. And so I called her school and I said, do you guys have anybody teaching this stuff in my area? And they said, yes. As a matter of fact, we have a graduate who just opened a school. So I studied with her for 6 years. And then here I am all these years later, 30 years later, fast forward, I teach what I do in a weekend. And people say, well, if it took you 6 years to learn it, how can you teach it in a weekend? Are you just a slow learner? I said, yeah, well, maybe. I think we could use the analogy of we used to use carrier pigeons to relay information, and then we used horseback riders, and then the Wells Fargo wagon and mail, and now we communicate instantly with our technology. And it's the same thing. Barbara Brennan's work is 50 years old. And I've added all kinds of things from my experiences over these decades of doing this work, not professionally, just in the last 7 or 8 years doing it professionally. And so everybody has the ability. I did not have dead people chasing me as a kid, let alone what I would have done with that information had I known. And I learned how to do all this, and I teach people how to do all of the things that I do, because we all have the ability. We're born with it.
Hmm. And I think that's something, I'm glad you mentioned that right off the bat, because I was going to bring that up. I think people have this misperception that to be able to communicate with spirits, to tune into your psychic capacities, that you need to have been born with it. It's a gift, it's a talent, and only some people have it. And that's not true, because I myself also have learned many skills in this area and have taught other clients how to do it themselves. So I
Yeah.
think it's really exciting. And I think
Yeah.
maybe what's happening in this day and age and why it's moving quicker is because so many people are finally waking up to these, innate abilities that we all have.
And little children are very good at this until grown-ups say, "Oh, honey, that's just your imagination. That's not real." And then they learn to shut it down and not trust it. And when we encourage, I have a whole series of children's books. There's 4 of them. They're called the Angel Messages series, and they're picture books. Actually, I have one here. They're so cute. The illustrations are just darling. And it's angels giving information to kids. And it's for their grown-ups as much as for the kids. And the thing is, when we encourage them and we say, "Oh, tell me more. What are you seeing? What did that what did what did Grandpa Bob tell you? Grandpa Bob died 20 years before this 3-year-old was born." But the 3-year-old talks to Grandpa Bob. Well, how does he know all this stuff? This kid can't read yet. And when we encourage these little ones to tell us more, then they don't discount it. And then it gives them an extra set of skills to help them navigate the world as they grow.
Well, and to not be fearful, right? Because I know for me, I grew up in the era of the Poltergeist and the Exorcist and all these like horrible Hollywood movies that were so scary that when I did, and as a kid, I knew there was a spirit in one of the houses that we lived in. I knew a guy had died in there and I could sense his presence, but I was terrified that he was going to get me. He was going to do something bad to me. So, and religions sometimes reinforce that message. And so how do you what do you say to people when they have that deep-seated fear that, these beings are more powerful than me, they can harm me, they can, knock things around? What do you
Yeah.
tell them?
All spirits are pure love. That whole evil spirit thing is not real. And it's just been propagated throughout the millennia by cultures and religions and governments and others to control the masses with fear. We saw that in the pandemic. People did stupid stuff because they were in fear and they were looking for a leader to tell them what to do, even if it didn't make sense. When we're in fear, we're in fight or flight, we lose clarity. We can't think correctly. Furthermore, I have an aside about The Exorcist. May I share it?
Yeah.
The Ouija board. The
Yes.
Ouija board was the number one selling game in the world. Milton Bradley made it. We had one when I was growing up. We used to use it at slumber parties.
Yes.
We try and, communicate with spirits and get somebody to levitate. We weren't ever able to do that. But the thing about the Ouija board that I find so fascinating is it's patented.
Uh-huh.
I have patents. I have multiple patents on physical devices. It's hard to get a patent.
Yeah.
And I think I would have loved to have been the patent examiner in the room. Can you imagine? And then they're showing him that it works and that it's really something that's extraordinary and there's nothing like it out there. I mean, wouldn't you love to hear the story on that?
Yeah. I
And
have
when
no
we
idea.
when the every home had a Ouija board. And then when The Exorcist came out and they used the Ouija board in the story, that's when the Ouija board started being bad. But people have been doing this stuff since the beginning of time. When I was a little girl, I got to go to some baby showers with my mother and my grandmothers. And they had a pendulum sometimes that they would hold over the
Belly.
pregnant woman's belly.
Yes.
And if it went counterclockwise, it was a girl, and if it went clockwise, it was a boy or whatever, and it was a game, but that's ancient. That stuff's ancient. It's been done since the beginning of time, and there's nothing evil about any of it.
Yeah, and people have been communicating with the spiritual world, with spirits and beings beyond, this human form for millennia as well. And there are people who've had ecstatic experiences of like really profound, like spiritual awakenings and experiences that have been really beautiful. And I think a lot of that does get overshadowed by the Hollywood, scary, demonic, version of things. So,
But
um,
they're
it,
just trying to elicit an emotion,
yes,
in entertainment, in the publishing industry, in the TV and movie industry, and all of that. It's when somebody can feel something, they remember the scene, they remember the movie, they go, "Oh, you gotta go see this movie," kind of a thing.
right. And then they sense a ghost in their house, and then they get terrified because they think it's
Well, yeah.
going to
Well,
turn into The Exorcist or something. Yeah.
and you know way more about this than I do just because of your background and your training. When we encounter something that we don't understand, whether we've watched a scary movie or not, we immediately go into fight or flight. It's an autonomic nervous system response. And when we're in fight or flight, the blood drains from our brain, goes to our heart and our extremities so we can run away from the perceived fear. And we don't think clearly. We talked about that a minute ago. So of course we're scared because we don't understand what it is.
Yes. Well, let's use this as a segue then to move into, some more things you've experienced, maybe yourself and in your work with clients and in teaching this stuff. So I've had the experience before, I have sort of an alternative perspective on mental health, which is much more comprehensive and includes other cultures, because, many other cultures do not see mental health the way we see it here. They
Right.
certainly would not see, perceive that someone who hears voices or who sees things, they would not say they're hallucinating and schizophrenic and all of that. And yet here in the West, we often do pathologize people's awareness. And that can include even things, I've seen it where um, clients who have anxiety or depression, oftentimes they're attuning to the energies around them, and there may be beings around them that are carrying some of those energies. Have you seen this as well in your work?
I see there are a lot of physiological explanations for depression and anxiety. And I was mortified to learn recently that 1 in 4 American women are on an antidepressant or anti anxiety medicine. And I said, "What?" I That blew my mind. I had no idea. And those, I've been told, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this, I've told are some of the most addictive substances on the planet. In some instances, worse than crack cocaine and some of the other illegal drugs that we hear about. I know a couple of psychiatrists who all they do is help women detox and withdraw from antidepressants because the withdrawal symptoms are so horrific. So I think that a lot of, especially women, have been put on antidepressants, and it's a physiological thing that's going on. Their hormones may be affected. They may have leaky gut. They may have mold exposure. They may have other things going on physiologically. They may have low vitamin D, vitamin B. They may not get any sunlight. They don't get outside to go to walks for walks and just to be out in the sun, which always makes people feel better. And that's what I see. I'll see more of a physiological situation going on. Furthermore, there is always an emotional component in place before any kind of medical illness or condition arises 100% of the time. So we explore that as well.
So does that mean, because I know I'll ask this question too, when clients come with some sort of medical or a mental health issue, when did it start? What was happening in your life around that time?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it can be that they've been exposed to mold or they've had a lot of antibiotics, and so they've got malabsorption issues. And when the cell membranes get tough because they're in a heightened immune response. Well, all those goodies made in the gut, the brain chemicals, the serotonin, the dopamine, and stuff like that, may be free flowing in their blood tests, but it's not penetrating that cell membrane. And until they get their gut healed, it's not going to in the volume that it needs to in order for them to feel good.
So let's talk a little bit about your medical intuitive work, because that's what you're alluding to here. How did you and I know people, you talk about different clairs, maybe you can say something about that. How do you personally get a sense for what's going on with a client's health? Like, are you seeing, like, their, is it visual? Do you see what's going on in their body? Is it more of a felt sense? Like, how does the information come to you?
All of the above. All of those ways. I'm a visual learner, so information comes in visually first for me, but I get everything else. I get what I call divine downloads, which is direct knowing. I'm getting information from spirit in my head. I'm seeing things, I'm feeling things, I'm smelling things, all of the above. And how I do it is I raise my vibrational level at the level of spirit, because we're all spirits attached to a body having a human experience. And when we're attached to a body, we vibrate more slowly simply because the body has mass. So I've learned how to turn my abilities on and off at will. And I don't scan anybody without their permission because I think it's a HIPAA violation. I just think it's unethical to, somebody has pneumonia, you can talk to them about how they're feeling, but you're not looking at their chest x-ray without their permission. So I'll connect to somebody in my mind's eye. I'll see a laser beam come from my body wherever I am and hook into the person wherever they are. I could find you if you were in a galaxy far, far away. It doesn't matter. And then I envision shooting energy from their feet up through the top of their head. And it's like I'm looking at a hologram of them. And it's the equivalent to my being a human MRI. It's like an X ray or a CT scan or an MRI. And the energy always goes where it's most needed first. I always go in blind first because I want to see what's the most pressing issue, even if it's asymptomatic. And oftentimes we're heading off a problem at the past, and or we're finding the root cause of perhaps several different symptoms. So something's identified, and then immediately thereafter, there's some type of energetic healing that begins. And it can take the form of something getting added, something getting removed. I watch procedures all the time that emulate what I saw in the emergency room and the operating room in hospitals throughout my career in that industry for more than 30 years. Sometimes I see healings that utilize methodologies and devices that haven't been invented yet. And I'm very descriptive with my client or somebody calling into my show, and I want them to envision what I'm seeing in my mind's eye because it helps integrate the healing into the body. The body's going to follow what the brain's showing it, even if the brain doesn't believe it to be true. We talked about scary movies before. Well, it's pretend, but your heart rate's up and you're scared out of your mind and your body's following what your brain's showing it.
Right. So when you're doing, when energetic healing is happening, now, is this something you're consciously sort of intending, and you're moving the energy? Are you allowing spirits, or do you have certain guides you work with that are doing the work? Is it a combination of the two?
Yeah, it's spirit working through me and with me to help that person heal themselves. Not one particular spirit. We're all made in the image and likeness of God. We're all a fractal of the divine. And so source communicates through individual spirits and individual people, but it's all source. It's like you can take a drop of water out of the ocean, but it's still the ocean and it's still water. And so it's spirit working through me and with me to help that person heal themselves, because nobody ever heals anybody else, ever. No doctor, no medical provider, no shaman, no healer like you or like me. We help the person heal themselves. Imagine if you had a big cut on your leg and you were bleeding like crazy and you went to the emergency room. to have them help you. Well, they're going to stitch it up, but that doctor's not going to make your skin grow back. You make your own skin grow back. And that's how all of this works. The energy healing, I believe, is part of the healing equation. Eastern medicine, Western medicine, complementary medicine, holistic medicine, energy medicine. It's all pieces of the puzzle for the person to access to help them heal themselves.
How important is it? I think you referenced this before, but I want to really highlight this. How important do you think it is to understand the root cause of a condition?
I think it's very important because otherwise, in our Western medical model right now, people are put on prescriptions for life. I had a client this morning in Italy, and she was told, she said, I got an autoimmune disease, and the doctor told me that I'm going to have to be on this medicine for life, and he's going to add 3 or 4 more here soon. And I said, eh. So I got her on my radar. Well, she's got leaky gut, she's got yeast overgrowth in her GI tract. They said, no, we'll get your gut healed and you're not going to be on medicines. And the doctor wanted to give her a bunch of really potent anti-inflammatories used for arthritis and stuff like that, almost like chemo drugs. And she's saying, oh, I just don't want to take them. I said, you're right. Follow your intuition. You don't need them because every drug has side effects.
Right. Well, and so then I would imagine that sometimes you also see this in the case of, again, coming back to the mental health. I personally don't really see a separation between physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual because it's all energy.
Yeah.
But we make this distinction because that's the type of doctor I am. What about when people are coming with, like a mental health diagnosis? And you're looking for the root cause, do you ever find with that, or with the physical stuff too, that maybe the root of it is not in this timeline, that either or maybe it's before this lifetime, or in another timeline lifetime? I know quantum physics tells us time isn't real, so that kind of twists your brain a bit, but
Yeah.
can you comment on that?
Yeah, there's always a physiological thing going on. And Dr. Chris Palmer at Harvard has very famously in the last couple of years talked about that most of his patients, and he's got the sickest of the sick, really, some of his patients have been on disability for decades and not able to work or function normally. And he puts them on a ketogenic diet. And he said, not only does it help their symptoms, it heals their brains. And he said only 10% of his patient population benefit from medication. And so I talk about that. I'll send them that reference to Dr. Palmer's work. And I have many, many clients that have tried it and had wonderful success with it. And it sounds so simplistic, but his research has found that the food supply, especially here in America, is not great. I like to say I was weaned on Twinkies myself. Twinkies, ho-hos, ding dongs. I mean, our pantry was like where all the kids came in the neighborhood. And and so to answer your question, yes, there's always a physiological component going on, and there's always some kind of an emotional component happening. At the end of a healing, when I have somebody as a client for an hour, we'll talk about a multitude of things. We can do medical stuff. We can talk to your dead grandma. I can scan your cat. We can do past lives. I mean, whatever out of the buffet of psychicness that we can cram into an hour, we do. And I have 5 graduates that work with me too. And just to get more people help, they can usually get in to see them within a matter of days. And so at the end of every healing, Adriana, what I do is I look at what I call the energy field membrane. That's the container that holds the energy that makes up our body and our spirit. I went through 12 years of Catholic schools. I was taught that the spirit or the soul, I use spirit, soul to me sounds religious, means the same thing. I was taught that the spirit is somewhere in the chest area. And that's not what I perceive. What I perceive is the spirit's the main part of us and the body's inside the spirit. Think of the old masters' paintings of a religious figure. Oftentimes they're depicted with a halo around their head or around their whole body. That's their aura, it's their energy field, it's their spirit. We all have it, we're all holy. So that's contained, that energy is contained in what I call the energy field membrane, which reminds me of a really thin plastic, really thin saran wrap plastic bag. And when there's a tear or a hole in that energy field membrane, there's an energy leak. Energy leaks always precede any kind of medical condition, and they're caused by an energy block, a la Eastern medicine. Acupressure, acupuncture, clear the block, get the chi to move, that whole concept. Energy blocks are always caused by an emotional event, either in this life or a past life. So envision going into that terror hole. And if it's this lifetime, I'll say, okay, 1997. And I'll say, does that mean anything to you? Did you move? Did you go to a new school? Was there a divorce? Did somebody die? What happened? They know pretty much instantly what that emotional event was. I would say high 90% of my clients know, boom, my parents got divorced. My grandmother died. I went to a new school. We moved across the country, and there were a bunch of mean girls there that were bullying me. I mean, they know instantly. If they don't, I can go further and I'll be shown a scene, like I'm walking into a movie of, okay, you were a freshman in high school, you're walking down the hallway and, and somebody tripped you, some mean girl tripped you or something. And they'll go, "Oh my God, I haven't thought of that in 40 years." But it's something that caused an energy block. If it's a past life, I'll envision going into that terror hole and I'll be shown where it was, when it was, a little bit about what happened. We'll correlate that with their current life. Bottom line, where that emotional event happened and when caused a little energy block, looks like a little kernel of unpopped popcorn to me. And then other life events, emotions piled on top of it, eventually causing enough pressure caused a blowout in that membrane and they were leaking power. So once we identify where did that kernel of the energy block begin, once we illuminate it, it eradicates all that other energy that's piled up over the years, and the energy filled membrane instantly heals. Body goes back to working on full power, helps the body regain and maintain health. So it's really fascinating how in past lives, there's a semblance of a script that we come in each lifetime to explore and experience. And we'll see that semblance repeat throughout multiple lifetimes. Lots of subscripts too. We're not exploring just one script, but let's say you want to be a teacher. Well, there are a bazillion ways you can teach. So different time, different place, different set of circumstances, same basic script, teaching. And so we're looking at that script from a bunch of different perspectives, and our spirit is growing in perspective. An analogy I use for past lives is, think of Hamlet. Hamlet, how many times has Hamlet been performed since Shakespeare wrote it in 1602? Who
Millions.
knows? Billions, right. In what language? Where? What was the year? What was happening in the world? Who were the actors? Who was the director? Who was the set designer? All those different variables are going to give the audience a different perspective of the same script. And that's how I see past lives coming in to be helpful.
And so you just mentioned something that the spiritual kind of evolve, the spirit evolving, right? Learning
Yeah.
things, evolving, becoming more conscious. Some people call it an ascension
Mhm.
process that we seem to be in
Right.
overall here on Earth right now, a raising of the consciousness. What role do you think that working through past emotional blocking experiences, traumatic events, like how important is that? Because I've seen, at least in my own process, that has really accelerated quite a bit in the last year. How much material from this and other experiences and intergenerational and all that, but all the trauma that I've experienced or been exposed to seems to be coming up for me to work through, clear the energy, release whatever, release the after effects, the limiting beliefs and things that would come from that,
Mhm.
the emotional blockages and things, heart walls, all these types of things. How important is it for us to kind of do that? Some might call it even shadow work, in order to continue to evolve spiritually.
Well, I think that's a question for you because I'm not versed in that, and obviously you're an expert in that. I'm looking for my application to help the person heal, period, bottom line. There's always room for psychotherapy, there's always room for all of that. I wanna get that kernel where that energy block began out by the root. It doesn't have to be the most dramatic thing or traumatic thing that's happened to somebody. I wanna know, where did it start? Because unlike in psychotherapy, patients are oftentimes told, well, we're going to talk about your life and it's going to be like peeling an onion a layer at a time. Always application for that. In the work that I do, I want to get the onion out by the root, get all that pent up energy that's piled on top of it out in one fell swoop, and the energy field membrane heals. I've never seen an energy field membrane rupture after it's been healed. And I've done this tens of thousands of times. I'm not saying it can't, but I'm saying it's highly unlikely because I've never seen it. Furthermore, the thing about where did that energy block begin? It can be something very benign, like somebody called you a bad name when you were little and it hurts your feelings. And we look at that as adults and we think, well, that was no big deal. But it was a big deal to your 3-year-old little self when it happened. Or it could be something really dramatic. My favorite dramatic story happened with a client who lives on Guernsey on one of the northern British Isles, and she had this big hole in her energy field membrane. I went into it energetically and I saw this scene of her as a young girl. She looked like she was a preteen, and there was an explosion behind her. And I said, does that mean anything to you? And she said, absolutely. I was a victim of an IRA bombing when I was 12. And I spent 3 months in the hospital. And I thought, well, yeah, that qualifies as a big dramatic, traumatic event. Once we illuminated it, it eradicated that energy block, energy field membrane healed, and her body healed. So it's really remarkable the things that I get to see. When we get past life information, oftentimes we can validate it with historic documentation online. And we always guys say, we can't make this stuff up. There's no way. Yeah.
No, I mean, and that's how they actually have validated. And people don't know this, but I mean, there are thousands and thousands of case studies of past life documenting the veracity of past lives when they have, you know, like these little kids who can
Yeah.
speak languages they were never
Right.
exposed to, and they were like,
Right.
yeah, I was Sergeant so and so in the 25th Infantry, blah blah blah, and then they look
The
it up and
Civil
like,
War. Yeah.
sure enough, there was a
Yeah.
guy who what.
Well, the University of Virginia has a whole department that studies that stuff and has for decades. Yeah.
So people just don't know that that research is even out there. It's very
Yeah.
scientifically grounded, you know,
Right.
and
Don't
they
you
can't.
don't you love it when science catches up with
Yeah,
woo
science
woo?
is catch. I know
Yeah.
science is always running behind, trying to catch up.
I know, 'cause woo-woo's been here for forever, and science is just catching up
And
with
what's
it.
really interesting is where science, I think, also converges with spirituality. Like when you start getting into the quantum world and it
Right.
stops making like logical sense, that's really fascinating. But I do want to ask you a question that came when you were talking about reading the energy field, and the energy membrane, and all the things. Do you ever? I'm thinking about people who identify as like highly sensitive or empathic. Do you ever find when you're reading their fields that like they're holding other people's energies in
No,
their
never,
bodies or around them?
never.
I know a lot of people think that way.
Now, having said that, we have what are called bioplasmic streamers that look to me like a laser beam when it leaves my body, and then when I pull it out of my body every night when I go to bed, for everybody with whom I've worked during the day, it looks like an umbilical cord when it comes out. And it's similar to the old saying, well, he never cut the cord from his mother. That's what they're talking about. And physicists can measure the energy that goes back and forth between different spirits, different people. Like, I've got a big cord with my son, I got a big cord with my husband. Those stay in, but all my clients and anybody else with whom I interact, the checkout girl at the grocery store, we have a cord with anybody with whom we interact during a 24-hour period. You want to pull those out when you go to bed at night. But as far as evil spirits attaching to somebody's spirit, no. I've never seen that in 30 years of doing this.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned something too. I just want to clarify. I also talk to people about pulling out the cord rather than cutting it.
I agree.
Some people say if you cut it, you're not getting maybe all of it, or it can kind of grow back or
Pull
reconnect.
it out. Pull it out.
Yeah, pull it out.
As soon
There are
as it as soon as it comes out, it disintegrates, just evaporates. Yeah.
do you teach people in your classes and stuff? Do you teach them about kind of I would call it energy hygiene, if you will, but like how to care for your energy field with things like that?
Yeah, at the end of every day, pull the cords out. Yeah. But all this thing about, "Oh, you have to protect yourself before you do a session," and all that stuff, I don't buy any of that because all spirits are pure love, first of all. Secondly, when you're in fear, you're in a low vibration. You're cutting off the communication channels from spirit. So people say, "Well, surround yourself in the white light of blah 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 blah." And I'm like, when you do that, why are you doing that? To protect myself. Why are you protecting yourself? Because you're in fear. Fear is a low vibration. You've just lessened your spirit communication abilities.
Do you think that people, like the point of view you have creates your reality? Do you think that if people are functioning from that fear, lower vibrational space, that they will actually maybe create experiences that are frightening or with something that seems like it is really trying to harm them? Like they could actually make that happen because they believe that to be true? Is that what you mean?
Well, I think we go back to the clarity piece. When we're in fight or flight, we lose clarity. And something that we don't understand, we're going to be afraid. And when we're afraid, we don't think clearly. I have an example for you. I have a girlfriend who, before I met her, she said, "Oh, I had an evil spirit try and come in my front door and I wouldn't let it come in my home." And I said, "All right, tell me about that." Because we can do instant replays. Because to your point, time doesn't exist in the spirit world. So she said, "Well, I had this." So I did an instant replay and I was watching it in my mind's eye as she was describing it to me. And it was this spirit, there was this face coming through her very thick wooden double doors. And the face looked distorted. It looked scary. It looked like one of those old fashioned bank robbers with a pair of pantyhose on their face, to distort so they wouldn't be able to be identified. And she got up and she said, "You're not welcome here." And she took her son's golf club that was in her umbrella stand next to her front door. And she said, "You're not welcome here." And she started to swing it at the door. And I laughed. I said, that would be like swinging at fog. How efficient do you think that would have been?" And she said, "Well, but it left." I said, "All spirits are going to leave if you don't want them around. You just tell them to leave because all spirits are pure love." Well, we talked to that spirit and it was distorted because it was coming through that dense wooden door. And so, of course, it looked scary to her. And we got the guy's name. We got that he was a Civil War soldier. He had died in battle. He was looking for his daughter. His daughter had reincarnated as my girlfriend's daughter. We got his name, where he was from, his birth date, his death date, the daughter's information, the whole 9 yards, and then got him reunited with his daughter's spirit who helped him go into the light. So he was what I would call a ghost, and I'm happy to explain my take on ghosts if you'd like. And my friend said, "Well, so he wasn't an evil spirit?" I said, "No, all spirits are pure love. We interpret something as evil because we're afraid of it because we don't understand it. And so all that distortion is coming from the human mind. It's not coming from spirit."
Mm. So do you think then things like evil is sort of an invention, maybe religion or, like that type of thing? That's where that concept comes from?
Well, I think evil spirits are an invention of that. And people, you better do what I say or you're going to go burn in the eternal flames and blah, blah, blah. That's all nonsense. That's all created to control the masses. I believe evil exists in the human form, absolutely. We've got the whole good and evil thing. You got the black and the white, of or is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Yeah, we've got that whole duality concept. And we need to, because if we know what we don't want, it helps us create what we do. If everything was all just hunky, lovely, fabulous, unicorns and fairies all the time, we wouldn't have any incentive to create something new. And that's how new things come about. In heaven, they just, what I've been told a bazillion times is, you just think of something and it immediately appears. In the human form, we have to really develop things. And that's why so many spirits are clamoring to come back to the human incarnation, because they think it's fun.
Wow, what a concept.
Yeah.
And
And
here
I
we are, a lot of us right now are thinking, doesn't feel super fun here right now.
I know. And I've had so many, countless conversations with spirit about this over the years. And they say, when we're in something seemingly horrific, and it is from a human perspective, they're watching over us going, "Oh, cool. How's Adriana going to be able to get out of this jam? What's she going to come up with? What's she going to create? What thoughts is she going to follow? What path is she going to take?" And they're cheering us on. And we're in the middle of it just going, "Oh my goodness, this is the most horrible thing that's ever happened to me." And yet, when we look back at those experiences, oftentimes we can say, "Yeah, that was awful. And here are the good things that came out of it."
Yeah. I think that's very apropos for the time we're living in.
Yeah, I
Julie,
agree.
you've written a number of books, and you actually have been so generous to share one of your books with us. I'd love for you to tell us more about that.
Angelic Attendants, What Happens as We Transition from This Life into the Next, talks about how everybody is surrounded by angels and the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets as they're transitioning. It has diagrams inside the book too. And we all go through what I call the 12 phases of transition. The first time I saw any of this was when my own mother was dying in 2002. And I felt like the Lady of Justice statue with the balance. Because on one side, my heart was breaking because she was dying very unexpectedly. And on the other side, I was seeing all this glorious stuff happening in the spirit world that I'd never seen before, because I had never been around anybody as they were dying. And I have a fun story about how the book came about. I'll tell in a second. And so everybody goes through the 12 phases, regardless of if they die instantly, like in the case of a homicide or suicide, or whether they die over a prolonged period of time, days, weeks, months, even years. And the book has been very, very comforting to people. Many churches and synagogues of all denominations give it out to their families, many hospice organizations. So if anybody wants a free copy as a gift for listening to us today, just go to askjulieryan.com and you'll see on the homepage, click here to get your free gift. And then we'll send you a digital and an audiobook download. And we have it in Spanish as well, if you prefer that. So share it with your family and friends, because everybody's going to die. Everybody's going to lose a loved one. And when we're losing a loved one, we face our own mortality, whether we're aware of it or not. We're thinking, "Oh, I'm going to be there one day. I wonder what's really happening
I,
to my
I think
grandmother."
I think we could have a lot more. I'm so grateful you have this information out there, because I think there's a lot of fear around death,
Yeah.
of course,
Yeah.
right? And so if people had more education and information, I think it could be a less painful experience for
Right.
everyone involved. It could be more peaceful,
Right.
and even beautiful. I mean, that the possibility of that is there. But yes, people would have to overcome their fear and be willing
Right.
to be open to having this information. But what a gift. We will definitely put a link in the show notes for folks to get that if they would like to. And you also have an event coming up, I understand.
I do. And before we get off the book, two other interesting points. One is there's university based research that shows that 90% of people at the end of their lives see the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets as they're transitioning. 90%. So we often thought, "Oh, grandma was just hallucinating from the morphine that hospice was giving her." No, she wasn't. She was able to actually see and communicate with her deceased mother, perhaps, who'd been gone for 40 years. That's true, number one. Number two, how the book came about, fun, quick story. This dead Pope spirit showed up one time and he said, I was with my mentor. I was having a healing done on, she was doing a healing on me. And he said, you need to, well, he showed up, first of all, with his Pope hat on and all of his Pope outfit and his shepherd's rod and the whole 9 yards. And I said, well, who are you? And he said, I'm Clement. I said, I'm so sorry. I've never heard of a Pope Clement. And he laughed and he said, I was number 6. I said, okay, great. How may I help you? And he said, you need to teach the world what happens when somebody dies, because it's been so bastardized over the millennia and people are so afraid. And it's crazy because it's glorious. And you know it and you've seen it many, many times. And so you need to teach the world about it. And I said, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. I'm a businesswoman. People will think I'm nuts. I'm not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I left a little while later and I looked him up on my phone on the internet and learned that he was in office during the Black Plague when 2/3 of Europe died. He's best known for his prayers for the dying and his prayers for the dead. One other point, these 12 phases of transition are how the angels and the loved ones change configurations as the person is getting closer to death. And so when my mom died, there's a prayer said at the end of every Roman Catholic funeral called In Paradisum, which is into paradise when translated from Latin into English. And it talks about how angels and your loved ones will greet you and lead you into paradise. So when I was writing Angelic Attendants, I thought, I wonder where that prayer originated. And what I learned was that it began as a 5th century Gregorian chant. And perhaps it took till the 5th century till somebody was well educated enough that they could read and write. And certainly back then, those people were men living in monasteries and synagogues. They were the scribes. And I thought, okay, everybody's been able to see these phases of transition since the beginning of time. And maybe it took till the 5th century till somebody could talk about it. And then as we've become more well educated, people have forgotten this. So, my training, thank you for mentioning that, is October 24th through the 26th in Atlanta, Georgia. People are flying in from all over the US and abroad. And you learn how to do the whole buffet of psychicness, tell how close to death somebody is, communicate with spirits, medical, intuitive, and energy healing, pet communication, past lives, talking to anybody, any spirit, whether it's attached to a body or not, whether you knew them or not is irrelevant. And we learned to do it in a weekend, and it is just a blast. So information on that at my website too, askjulieryan.com.
Fantastic. What a gift. What a gift you are to the world and your work. It's so important. I think it's debunking a lot of the myths and fears that people we've referenced today, and the things that stop people. I think the fear keeps you from growing and evolving, right?
Right.
So here we are trying to give people a different perspective and maybe a little courage to take a step forward, because I know a lot of people are curious about this stuff. They don't really know where to start.
Right.
They don't know how to make sense of some of their own experiences. And it sounds like, you've really positioned yourself between your podcasts and your books and your workshops and things to really be a guide, be a beacon of light for those who are seeking. So thank you for that.
You are welcome. I work to blend spirituality and practicality. How do we use the spiritual to live a better human life of joy and purpose?
Thank you so much for being with us today, Julie. And thank you so much, audience, for tuning in. If you have liked this podcast, please do share, subscribe, repost it, do all the things that will help us get it out there in the hands of those who are seeking. Julie, thanks again for your time. And any final thoughts for us?
No, just you can find me on all the socials at Ask Julie Ryan, askjulieryan.com, Ask Julie Ryan on all the podcast networks. We've got 5 YouTube channels in 5 different languages. So come join us.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. This has been Dr. Adriana Popescu. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and share with others. To find out more about me, my guests, and more, please visit my website at adrianapopescu.org. See you next time!